Good afternoon and welcome to our 17th episode of Slow Living, a webinar series driven by sustainability rooted in community. Today we are honored with a very special guest, Berkley Gamble. Berkley Gamble is the founder of Past Life the Collective, a zero-waste, closed-loop clothing brand based locally here in Colorado. For Berkeley, changing our community and world starts with Past Life the Collective and the team of young women she has assembled who are stoked to be part of something larger than fashion. On this week's episode, Berkeley will be discussing her sustainability journey and why the clothing you buy and wear matters. Before I give the floor to Berkeley, I would just like to remind our audience that we will be having a Q&A portion of the webinar after her presentation. So if you have any questions for Berkeley during her presentation, please send them in the chat box and I will call on you to personally ask her when we get to the Q&A portion. So without further ado, Berkeley, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and yeah, 1 second. Okay.
That looks great.
Good, hold on, let's see. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. All right, so as said, my name's Berkeley and I'm the founder of Past Life the Collective. The whole reason that I got into this business is from my passion about sustainability and the environment. I learned that the fashion industry notoriously exploits both people and the planet, and decided that it's not really common knowledge about this stuff. There's not a lot of knowledge about textile waste, and it's something that needs to be brought to our attention because what we buy and what we wear really does matter. I'll say this a million times probably, but where we spend our dollar is us communicating to the world what kind of world that we want to live in. So, all right, let's get going. So, Past Life the Collective is zero waste, sustainable, ethical closed loop clothing brand. I'm going to break down all those 4 parts for you. Being zero waste is very uncommon in the fashion industry. When clothes are made, you cut them out of large yardages, and that excess out of it is always just thrown away. It's never repurposed. We save all of our scraps to repurpose them, and they're also being saved, and there's a technology that we're using to turn all of them into yarn to make sweaters for a following collection. So no scrap is left behind, and it's a very tedious process for like a manufacturing facility to do it. And it's a lot more expensive, which is why other companies and brands don't do it. In terms of sustainability, we really have thought about everything from, we mail only in compostable mailers. We don't do zippers in any of our clothes because zippers are very hard to recycle. We only do wooden buttons, and the wooden buttons are harvested from a tree plant, and each tree that is taken down, 2 trees are planted. And then the biggest piece of it all is our fabric. It's called dead stock fabric in this industry. So basically, when any brand that you admire or like goes to make clothing, the first thing that they do is make fabric, which is agriculture. It's an agricultural process. It requires tons and tons of water, and it requires so many chemicals. In China, they actually joke, it's not a funny joke, but that you can always tell what the color of the next season is going to be because the rivers are like bright pink or something like that. Anyways, so these companies go and do or make all this fabric, and then they don't ever use all of it. They usually only use 80 to 90% of the fabric. That leftover fabric, like 10 to 20%, is then either put in landfills or burned, or is put in these warehouses of dead stock fabric. So we go and get that fabric, which was deemed dead, and we, turn what another brand thought was trash into treasure. This also makes it so that everything we have is never going to be made again because we're just using leftover stuff. So we're not creating anything new. Ethical. So the fashion industry is also notorious for slave labor, essentially, and it's not just in countries in Asia. It's also happens in the US, and I'll explain more about that later. But it was very important to me that the people who make the clothing are paid beyond fair wages. And then the last thing is closed loop. So another thing that is becoming more popular in fashion, but definitely not popular enough yet, is being closed loop, which means the clothes are never going to end up in a landfill. So basically for us, our policy is you wear something of ours into the ground, you repair it, whatever, and then you're done with it. You can send it back to us and we will repurpose it or fix it and resell it. And then you will get credit to, purchase something else from us. So the whole premise of it all is just no waste. We don't want to contribute to more because we live in a society of more. So that's what we do. All right. So now I'm going to get into a bit of information about the fashion industry. Like I said in the beginning, it's not super well known about how harmful it is for our planet. So 10% of the world's carbon emissions are from the fashion industry, or 8 to 10%, depending. There's quite a bit of literature on it, but that's the range. And only 2% of clothing is made in the US. 3 out of 5 items end up in a landfill. The average American throws away 65 pounds of clothing per year, and only 7% of garment workers make a livable wage. Unethical labor also exists in America. So first, I'm going to touch on that point. Like I said earlier, being an ethical business was very important to me. In fashion, there's a lot of exploitation for garment workers because they're not paid by the hour. They're paid by piece that they make. So they can end up, especially for more complicated garments, they can end up only making a few pieces and they're only getting paid, 50 cents per piece or whatever, and then leave the day with making $1.50 or something like that. And like I said, that's a very common practice in America as well. We don't do that. We pay the sewers by hour. The next thing I'll touch on is the 3 out of 5 fashion items that end up in a landfill. So this is from the consumer side. A couple things. One, donating clothing to Goodwill, unless it's in good condition, usually ends up being thrown in a landfill, or it'll be shipped overseas to Africa and will end up in a landfill over there. So instead of having this mindset of, thinking that you're donating, it's actually better to try to resell your clothing or repurpose clothing into something else. Like if you have holes in your clothing, I don't know, tear it up and turn it into a dog toy or something like that. That is actually better than donating clothing. That being said, another reason why 3 out of 5 fashion items end up in a landfill is because of fast fashion and the quality of clothing. So it's actually really important, even though quality clothing is more expensive, to buy it because it lasts longer and you want clothing that lasts lifetimes. The last part that I want to talk about is how only 2% of clothes are made in the US. This is hopefully going to increase over time, but the reason that it's only 2% is because labor does cost more over here, and we all are very accustomed and in the world of fast fashion, and there's literally no way to cheapen a garment more other than making the labor really cheap and sending it overseas. So when I started Past Life, it was extremely important to me that I was going to make stuff in the US. And not only that, I'm very proud that we make it locally in Colorado, which is, the fashion industry is not an industry in Colorado. And then as for this photo, the photo is just a good example of what a sew operation looks like. This one is from overseas. But again, a lot of these people are not, working normal hour work weeks. They're working they're working 80 plus hours a week because they're only being paid by piece. And it's very, very important that you want to support companies that pay people well wages. Like, if you think about it, you want to know that the jacket or shirt that you're wearing, like the person that touched it was also, treated with respect and, happy with their job. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is what can we do? So as a consumer, there is a lot to do, and I know it seems overwhelming, and I definitely also still struggle with a bit of like ignorance is bliss in this area, because it is hard to change habits, especially consumption habits, and when we live in a world of consumerism. But it is not that difficult to do your research. So we'll go through all of this. So do your research. A huge part of being a conscious consumer is being conscious. Like I said, ignorance is bliss is just not really going to work for us. So the first one is do your research when shopping, but watch out for greenwashing. So greenwashing, if this is a new term for you, is basically when most of the time, like a larger company will be lying about their sustainable practices because it's like a marketing scam, basically. So I am going to call out like a brand right now, and I apologize if it offends you, but H&M is a great example of this. They will do a sustainable collection, and and it's very common knowledge in the fashion industry that if you go look through the whole collection, they may have used organic cotton for one piece out of a collection of 100 items. And so that would be greenwashing. Again, it's hard to track for this. And, of course, we always want to trust brands that we love, but doing your research, Googling about it, looking, more than just on their website, or if you're in a store, talking to the store manager, someone who works there about it is always important. You can also read about their practices, like on hang tags. I think you can look to see where things are made, etc. So back to that, looking for zero waste closed loop brands. There are large companies that are still doing good things. Patagonia is a great example of this, same with Prana. They are both working very hard towards being closed loop. But again, just larger companies, it's harder to do. Below that one is repair, and then repurpose. I think one thing, and this is, for young people like myself, especially, we don't really realize the value of like a tailor or something like that, but that's a real thing for a reason. And as you grow and your body changes, seeing a tailor to have your clothes fit you the right way or fix little things is very valuable. And you'll end up saving money over time because you can fix a pair of pants that, and then they'll last you longer instead of just having to buy new ones and throw away the old ones. And then, like I touched about earlier, trying to figure out ways to repurpose things. You do have to get a little creative, but there are so many options. One of my favorite ones is truly the dog toy situation. I love doing that with like sheets and stuff like that as well. All right, the top one says buy less, buy better. So that says choose clothing that is better quality and will last lifetimes. Again, I feel like I've hammered this into you, but buy less, buy better is a term that we commonly use in the sustainable fashion industry. And again, it just goes with like kind of having to understand, yes, items are at a higher price point that are sustainable, but they are going to be higher quality so that they're going to last longer. You have to think about maybe clothes that you like want to pass down, honestly. Like that's back in the day, like in the olden days, like my grandparents, my grandma only had a couple shirts and a couple pairs of pants, and that's it, because they were very high quality. So we need to move back to like that level again. And then the last thing to do when shopping and being mindful is thinking global, act local. So I think this has really, really been hammered into people even more so with the pandemic, but supporting your local community and this local businesses around you is really a huge part of being sustainable. Even though it's so easy to like go on our phone and order something from Amazon Prime, and I'm guilty of it too, it's better to just support your community because that's going to, support your economy, and then overall it's just more sustainable. There's, the mail doesn't have to travel as far, etc. So those are my last points. And then, as I said in the beginning, where you spend your dollar is you communicating to the world what kind of world you want to live in. And I really think, especially if you think about like what kind of world your children want to live in, like for them, keeping that in mind as you make purchases, especially in, the sustainable fashion world or the fashion world, but overall just like conscious purchases and conscious consumerism can go a really long way. I'm very much a big proponent of, it's not about being perfect. You don't have to do everything perfect, but if everyone just like starts thinking a bit more and makes one more sustainable option, something that's a core part of their life, there's going to be more change and a better future. So that's all. So yeah.
Appreciate that, Berkeley. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for the presentation. Now, honestly, I want to hit a little bit more on your point of that you just need to take the first step, right? You don't need to change overnight, and you don't need to, solve everything in one go. And people are so afraid with the green movement to be reprimanded by their actions, It's the little things that add up, not everything at once. So I really appreciate you hitting on that. So I'd like to open it up for questions right now. And I'd like to start with my own personal question, because this kind of goes hand in hand with the fact and the common misconception of the green movement and being more sustainable is that it's more expensive, right? And so with somebody who is looking to be more sustainable and have a less environmental impact, how can they source something sustainably without breaking the bank? If somebody is making minimum wage and they want to help out, what do you think is the best strategy for, the slow fashion industry, anything that comes down to, the consumer culture?
Perfect. Great question. So the first thing that I would say is the most affordable way to be sustainable is to wear what you already have in your closet. And I know that, and that's, not super interesting or groundbreaking, but that just comes with sustainability in general, and trying to figure out how to be creative with the clothing that you already have, and switching it up. The other thing that you can do though is thrift shop. However, I am on the fence a little bit about thrift shopping because there is quite a gentrification of thrift shopping right now. But that being said, if you're a person making minimum wage, and this is very important to you, thrift shopping is a great example of taking something secondhand. There are also lots of websites, Poshmark, Depop, to name a few, that you buy clothing secondhand. So it's pre-loved, pre-worn stuff. Really great options. And then the last thing, I mean, obviously you have to look at it instead of, if you break down your whole year and you think about how many items a year you buy, add up those costs, and then you're like, okay, so I spent overall the whole year $400 on clothes. Okay, well now maybe I can just buy two items the whole year, but they're gonna last me a long time, and they're from a closed loop brand, so I know that once I'm done with them, I'll get a credit to keep shopping with them. So it's hard to switch your mentality, but it's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid and just sort of focusing on that and like just holding yourself to that standard.
No, absolutely. I mean, especially in a world where it's more, it's so detrimental, and we have to focus on more of putting emotion and feeling back into our items and really taking care of them. So I appreciate that outlook. So we will wait a little bit for people to send in some questions. But in the meantime, I have another one for you. And this one goes kind of with a play off our own webinar series, Slow Living, going into slow fashion. So if you could just clarify slow fashion versus fast fashion as more of like, a quick, elevator pitch, that'd be great just for clarification.
Cool. very easy. So fast fashion is clothing that is rapidly made and it's coming out multiple times per year, like every single month, maybe every single or like every 2 weeks, a new drop of something is coming out. So, and it's just being made at a fast level. Whereas slow fashion is brands that are coming out with 1, 2 collections, maybe 3 a year, and ensuring, that from start to finish with the people who are making it, there's, intention behind it being slow and that people are being taken care of. I think really the biggest proponent between the two is wanting or no, like with slow fashion, just like slow living, there's intention behind everything. And in fast fashion, the intention is to generate consumerism.
No, absolutely. And that comes off of, making a profit, and even diving a little bit more into your brand and researching into your website. I really enjoy the slogan of, you're not just trying to make money. You're not just trying to make clothing. You're trying to change the culture overall. And that's what it's about. So that's why we started Slow Living, is to connect individuals and more or less take a step back during these times and figure out what really matters. So I really appreciate all that. That's pretty amazing. So we actually have a question from Jared, and I will unmute Jared so he can ask you personally. Jared, you should be unmuted.
Hi, Berkeley. Thanks for the presentation. I just had a quick question. Wondering if you know of any resource that can help find sustainable brands, just so you don't necessarily have to do all the research yourself.
Yes. So there's this app, it's called Good on You. And you can also Google it, like they have a website as well. They review brands and give like a full background on it. And they have, they review brands that are also not sustainable, so that it educates people. We're right now under review to be a part of them. But that's a great place to start. Yep. There we go. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you.
So even going off of that question, which I really appreciate, Jared, if people can't, access electronic technology and the internet, what physically do you think would be a good outlet for people to, be a little bit more in the know regarding this issue?
In what way?
Just kind of connecting more or less with the slow fashion industry and getting more education on it. Is there a physical presence instead of being on the internet?
That's a great question. Honestly, to my knowledge, not really. This is definitely an internet movement, I feel like. And that, that should make, like, I should really touch on this. I do acknowledge, slow living as well, but slow fashion is very much a privileged thing to do and participate in, as it is a, privilege that we're here on Zoom talking about it. But that being said, like, if it's something, it's to circle back to like the community aspect of it. When you shop, it should be a conversation with any kind of local merchant that's selling clothing about, oh, where are these from? Like, from even just a small point, like the little things. It doesn't have to mean they have to check all boxes, but just like, where were these made? Like, how often, small things like that, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. We should know where everything's coming from, and people should have, that pride behind their product, right? And obviously it's very apparent with you, and I applaud you for what you're doing because it's pretty incredible. So we are getting another question in, and I will unmute Mark to ask it personally as well. So Mark, you should be unmuted.
Berkeley, hi, it's Mark. Great, really great presentation. In fact, this is the first time I've seen someone take the position that you have on this sort of whole life approach to materials. And I was wondering, have you considered materials that maybe have been not traditionally used in the fashion industry? In other words, textiles that could be reused, but that aren't traditionally thought of or part of the fashion industry? That was my first question. I have a follow-up as well.
That's a great question. I personally have not yet. It is not something it is something I'm very open to exploring. I think with launching a company, I don't come with a fashion background, so it seemed a bit daunting to go that route. However, there is some cool stuff coming out right now. Like I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there's been like repurposed car tires into like handbags and stuff like that. And then there's also a lot of stuff out there about, like, recently I read about pineapple skin being made into like vegan or like a leather for goods. So that being said, no, yeah, the answer is no, but I would definitely look into it because waste is waste and I just don't want it. So, and there's always avenues to be more creative.
Yeah, that's great. One other thought or question for you would be seeking out, and I don't even know exactly how you do this, but seeking out and I guess trying to find only fabric that's been sustainably produced to begin with. Is that even possible to do that? I mean, just with a narrow focus.
Yeah, so there is sustainable fabric out there. As I'm sure all of us know on here, sustainability is quite the umbrella term, and it is very difficult to check every single box within that umbrella. However, like there is, in someone's eye, organic cotton could be very sustainable. Or any kind of organic fabric, or like a hemp fabric could also be very sustainable. What's hard though is most of those fabrics are not being made in the US, and I'm really trying to be just a US brand because I'm trying to, support the place that I live.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that'll start changing. And there's a lot of pros to that as well, because it also then promotes organic farming and can start, to circle the US. So changing into organic farming again would be great.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your questions, Mark. Really appreciate that. So we are at the end of the webinar segment. And so Berkeley, if you have anything that you'd like to close on, you're more than welcome. If not, that's fine too. And I'll certainly close us out for the evening.
Just have to say thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your questions, everyone. I really appreciate it, and this was very fun for me. So thank you.
And thank you for joining us and spending your evening on a Sunday with us. We really appreciate the insight. Can't thank you enough, and keep up what you're doing. It's pretty incredible. To everybody that tuned in, thank you so much for joining us. Again, Berkeley Gamble. So everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Respect your mother and respect each other. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Oh, I love that.
Bye.
Bye.